here we are assembled to see a presentation on cryptography. What is cryptography and how cryptography serves as a defense against attacks in information security. So I will tell you that cryptography is the backbone of information security. Without cryptography, nothing is possible, because you have studied CIA triad on the first day, and all this CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability, they are being covered through this cryptography, and a special part that this confidentiality, no confidentiality could be maintained without cryptography. Okay, and cryptography also helps in maintaining integrity. Also, it helps in authenticating. It helps in this non-repudiation. So cryptography, when I say that cryptography is the backbone of the information security, and without cryptography, nothing is could be defended in this information security. Okay, so let us now come to our slides. So now we know that we are on the internet, and most of the internet addresses, because our computer networks have computers nodes, and those nodes have been assigned addresses from the INA, that is Internet Address and Naming Authority. You have DNS that matches your IP address, that maps your IP address to the DNS, so that you can access any URL or website using that URL, because it is very difficult to remember IP addresses, so that mapping is there. So internet addresses and all this naming authority thing, that is managed by INA. So there are many aspects of security. Now you see that our country is going for $1 trillion digital economy, and all the things are becoming digital day by day. So your e-commerce is there, your online payments are there, your financial transactions are being performed online. So let us see how these communications could be made secure. And one of the important thing for all the thing is that whenever we are going for protection, we have an authentication mechanism, and that authentication mechanism is still being done through passwords. So how you can protect your passwords? And now we are having some two-factor authentication system also, where OTP is being sent. So that how could be protected, how their communication could be protected. And this is only possible through cryptography, because this is an essential aspect for secure communication. Now, what is cryptography? So if you see here, if we go to the history of the cryptography is derived from the Greek word called cryptos, which means hidden secrets. And it is the practice of a study of hiding information. It is the art or science of converting a plain intangible data into an unintangible data, and again transforming that message into its original form. So there are two parts of cryptography. One is that you have to hide the information. So you will convert your plain text into an intangible data that is not in a readable format. And again, because that data has to reach a destination where it has to be read again, so it should be again retransformed to its original form. So that is called decryption. So the first part is encryption, where you are transferring your plain text to an intelligible data that is not in readable format, and then you are converting your unintelligible data to the original form. This is called decryption. Okay, so as I have told you, this cryptography provides confidentiality, integrity, and accuracy, and the rest of the things we will see in the later part of our presentation. What are the applications of the cryptography, how it is covering all the aspects of the secure communication. Okay, so the purpose of cryptography, as I have told you already in the introduction, that it covers authentication, it covers privacy, confidentiality, it covers integrity, and it covers non-repudiation. So let us see what is authentication. So the process of proving one's identity, means if we have to identify somebody, then that is authentication. For example, when you go to your computer and you log in through your username and password, that computer identifies you, means it is the same person who is allowed to access this computer, so computer identifies you. So this is authentication. So authentication has to be secure, means whatever your password are there, that has to be stored in a secure way. Otherwise, hackers can gain access to those passwords and they can falsify you, means they can log in with your username and password, and they can pretend you, and they can access all your resources. Now, next is your privacy and confidentiality. So the data which you are handling today, that may be at rest and that may be in transit. So we have to protect the data at rest also, and we have to protect the data in transit also. In transit means that is in the communication that is being transmitted to the network. So both of this data has to be protected, the data at the rest as well as data in transit, and that is done through this confidentiality, means privacy, confidentiality, and that is by converting the data into an interpretable form, so that when the data is stored, it is not in readable format. And if the data is in transit, it is not in readable format. So if somebody wants to, if the data is at your at rest and somebody is trying to read the data who is not authorized to read data, he cannot read the data until and unless he converts it to its original form. And similarly, if the data in transit is there, and as you have studied in the previous lecture, a man in the middle attack, if somebody is launching a man in the middle attack and trying to read your data, then that data is not in readable form, and nobody can gain a meaningful information about the captured information. Okay, so we have to protect data at rest as well as data in transit, and that is ensured through confidentiality, and we will see how confidentiality is maintained, how privacy is maintained in the later part of the lecture. And next is integrity. Integrity means, suppose I am sending message to you and somebody is trapping that message through the man in the middle attack, and he is able to change that data. He is able to change that data. So now it is in incorrect format, or incorrect information is being passed to the recipient. Then that means the integrity of the data is affected. Okay, integrity means correctness of the data. So if the correctness of the data is affected, that means we are losing integrity. And it is one of the purpose of the cryptography to preserve the integrity of the data also. Okay, so we have seen authentication, privacy, confidentiality, and integrity. Now let us see non-repudiation. Non-repudiation. What is non-repudiation? A mechanism to prove that a sender really sent this message. Suppose somebody is sending message to you and later on he is denying that he has not sent this message. And so to prove that, that only that person has sent the message, this could be ensured through digital signature mechanism that you will study in the later part of this lecture. So this is the non-repudiation. Means suppose I am sending you a message and then I cannot deny that I have not sent this. I have not sent this message. Okay, I cannot deny that I have sent that message. So this is non-repudiation. Okay, means a mechanism to prove that the sender really sent this message. Means suppose I am denying that I have not sent the message, then you have a mechanism to prove that really I have sent the message. So these are the purpose of the cryptography: to maintain authentication, to maintain privacy and confidentiality, to maintain integrity, and to have non-repudiation. Okay, now let us come to the types of the cryptography. So basically there are two types of cryptography. One is secret key cryptography and second is public key cryptography, that we will later on see. So secret key cryptography, public key cryptography, and some people also categorize cryptography into one more criteria, that is hybrid cryptography, where both the mixture of secret key cryptography and public key cryptography is used. So in the secret key cryptography, this is the first cryptography. This is also known as private key cryptography or symmetric key cryptography. Okay, so these are the different names of for the same cryptography: symmetric key cryptography, private key cryptography, or secret key cryptography. Okay, so here what is the fundamental principle is there, that a single key is used to encrypt and decrypt. Okay, so if you see here, this is This is the plain text here. And now you are encrypting is using a key. Okay, so this is the key here. This is the plain text. And now you are encrypting it using a key. Okay, so here what is done in cryptography? In cryptography, the algorithm is known to everybody. Only the key is kept secret. Okay, so the plain text is there. A key will be applied with the algorithm, and the message will be converted to ciphertext. Later on, you have the ciphertext, and then you will apply the reverse algorithm, the same algorithm which you have used for encryption, the reverse of that algorithm, and you will use the decryption key and you will convert it to plain text. Okay, so here single key is used, means single key is shared between the sender and the recipient. Okay, so the sender and recipient have the same key, and sender will use the key to encrypt the text. That will be converted to ciphertext. That will be sent to the recipient, and the recipient will use the same key to decrypt that ciphertext, and he will convert that ciphertext to the original form and read the data. So here a single key is used, means a single key is used for encryption and decryption. Okay, so this is why it is called secret key cryptography. And here, as it is written here, single key is used to encrypt and decrypt. Key must be known by both parties, means before the start of the communication, the parties, mean the sender and the receiver, they share a key. Okay, means they share a key before the start of the communication. That could be by any means. So we will see what are the mode, how they can transfer this key. Okay, so it may be, but suppose if there is there are very large number of persons involved in communication, then it is very hard to maintain that secret key, because large number of persons are involved. You cannot say you cannot share a same secret key with all the persons. Otherwise, suppose you want to communicate to a person, then second person will read it. And again, if we want to distribute that secret key, then also it is a problem, because lot of persons are there and everybody will know that key, and naturally it will be difficult to maintain secrecy of a key. That's why this key is this cryptography is very difficult to implement. But we will see that this is the most used cryptography technique. We will see in the later part of the lecture. Now, next is your public key cryptography. So in the public key cryptography, the sender has a key pair, that is, he has two keys. One is his private key, and other is his public key. Okay, so the public key he will distribute to all the world, and only private key he will keep as a secret. Similarly, the recipient will also have a key pair. One will be his private key, and the second will be his public key. He will publicly distribute his public key to all the world, and he will keep his private key secret. So what is the principle of this public key cryptography? Suppose I am encrypting something with a private key. Suppose I have a key pair. I am having a private key and I am having a public key. Suppose I am encrypting something with my private key, then that could be only decrypted by my corresponding public key. This is very important property in the public key cryptography. That means if something is being encrypted by a key, then that can only be decrypted by a corresponding key. That means if I am encrypting something with my private key, then that could only be decrypted by my public key. Similarly, suppose I am encrypting something with my public key, then that can only be decrypted by my private key. This is the most important property of this private key and public key pair. And next, this private and public key have no relation with each other. Okay, and the property and the two properties are important. Again, I am repeating, if something is encrypted using a private key, then that can only be decrypted by the corresponding public key. And if something is encrypted by a public key, then that can only be decrypted by a corresponding private key. These two are one of the most important properties of public key cryptography, and they are founding the foundation of this confidentiality and your digital signature principle. So now let us come to this property of public key cryptography, where if something is encrypted by a key, then that can only be decrypted by the corresponding key. So here there are two principles. One is the encryption principle and second is the digital signature principle. So what principle we follow in encryption? In encryption, we have to keep the communication secret. We have to keep the communication confidential. We have to keep the information confidential. That means if something I am sending to somebody, that should be kept secret, that should be kept confidential. Okay, so how we can ensure it? So we can ensure it like that. Suppose I am having a private key and a public key. And as I have told you that public key I will be distributing to all the world. So my public key is distributed to all the world. And now somebody wants to communicate with me. So he will encrypt it using my public key. Okay. And since he is encrypting it using my public key, and as I have told you the properties of this public key cryptography. So if somebody is encrypting something using my public key, then that can only be decrypted using my private key. This is very important. Suppose somebody wants to have a secret communication with me, so he will encrypt it using my public key. And since it is encrypted using my public key, so it can only be decrypted using my private key. And since I am keeping my private key secret, so I am the only person who can decrypt that message. So this is how this confidentiality or secrecy is maintained. Okay. So in the encryption principle, a plain text will be encrypted by a public key, and that mangled text can only be decrypted using by the corresponding private key. And since that private key is kept secret, so this confidentiality or secrecy is maintained. Okay. So what happens in this communication public key cryptography system? I will generate, or there is a public key infrastructure. I will talk about it later. So I am having my public, I will generate, suppose I am generating my private and public key by myself. So I will distribute by my public key to all the world, and that is done through public key infrastructure. So through public key infrastructure, my public key will be known to everybody. And if somebody wants to communicate with me secretly, he will use my public key and he will encrypt the message using my public key. And now, since that has been encrypted using my public key, that can only be decrypted by using my private key. So the confidentiality will be maintained. That means I can only decrypt that message unless and until my private key is compromised. So this is how this encryption, this confidentiality or secrecy is maintained. And this principle is known as encryption principle of the public key cryptography. And next is your digital signature principle that is used for authentication and this non-repudiation. So what is the digital signature principle? First was the encryption principle, and now I am coming to the digital signature principle. So in the digital signature principle, we will use the reverse of this. That means, suppose I am sending some message to you and I am encrypting it using my private key. Okay, I am encrypting that message using my private key. And suppose you are receiving that message and you are able to decrypt that message using my public key. That means it is a proof that I have encrypted using my private key. Means it is only encrypted by the person who has the private key. That means this is an ample proof that I have sent that message by encrypting it using my private key. And that's why when you are doing the encryption, it is called that you have signed the message. Okay, so you are encrypting that message, and if somebody is able to decrypt it using your public key, this is the ample proof that you have sent a message. And this principle is used for digital signature and non-repudiation in your this information security. So the second principle is the digital signature or the authentication principle, in which you are signing using your private key and somebody is able to decrypt it using your public key. Then that means that is ample proof that you have signed that message, or if you have encrypted using your private key. So the public key cryptography has two principles. One is the encryption principle. In the encryption principle, somebody, because I have distributed my public key, so if somebody wants to communicate secretly with me, he will encrypt that message using my public key. And since I have only the corresponding private key, so I will only be able to decrypt that message. And since this private key is kept secret with me, nobody else know my private key, so I will only be able to decrypt that message. And this is how secrecy or confidentiality is maintained. And in the public key principle, in the digital signature principle, suppose I am encrypting a message with my private key, and some else person is able to decrypt that message using my public key, and that message is decrypted. That means that I have only encrypted using my private key. So this corresponds to signing the message, using the private key. And this is ample proof that I have only sent that message, encrypting it using my private key. So this is known as the digital signature principle or the non-repudiation principle that is used in the information security. So this was the fundamental principle of the secret key cryptography and public key cryptography. So this is just diagrammatically explaining it using keys. So the plain text is there. For the encryption, what you are doing, you are using the public key and generating the ciphertext, and then that ciphertext is decrypted using public key. So here it is being demonstrated that this is your encryption principle. Okay. Okay, so now let us come to the next part. Okay, so as I have told you, this is the diagrammatic explanation of this secret key cryptography. So plain text is there. A key is used to produce the ciphertext, and then same key is used to produce the plain text from the ciphertext. So this is called secret key, symmetric key cryptography. SKC uses a single key for both encryption and decryption. And for decryption, plain text is there, and you are using this in the public key cryptography, this plain text is there. So you are encrypting it using the public key, and then it is being decrypted using a different key, that is the corresponding private key corresponding to that public key. So here two keys are used. So this is public key or asymmetric cryptography. PKC uses two keys, one for encryption and other for decryption. So secret key, that is symmetric key cryptography. And why it is called symmetric? Because same key is used for the encryption and decryption. And this public key or asymmetric cryptography, it is called asymmetric because different keys are used for encryption and decryption. And it is called public key because it has a key pair in which one of the key, that is known as public key, that is distributed worldwide through every person, means any person can have access to the public key of somebody. Okay. And next is your hash function. I will talk about in detail in the later part. So here there's a plain text and there's a hash function, and then there is a message digest that is calculated, and this message digest is irreversible. It means you cannot generate the plain text out of that message digest. So that is a hash function, and that is one-way cryptography. We will see the difference between the encryption and the hash function in the later part of the lecture. This is just a brief to show you. Okay, so Now let us dwell into more detail into this cryptography principles. So here in this slide, asymmetric key cryptography overcomes the key management problem by using different encryption and decryption key pairs. Having knowledge of one key, say the encryption key, is not sufficient enough to determine the other key, the decryption. That's why I have said you that this private and public key pair do not have any relation to each other. That is, private key could not be derived from the public key, and similarly public key could not be derived from the private key. And again, as I have told you, that there was distribution problem in the symmetric key cryptography because it was very difficult to maintain secrecy in a multi-world, multi-people environment. So in this, asymmetric cryptography plays an important role where you are distributing your public key to everybody and you are keeping your private key secret, so you can have a communication with one-to-many communication in this way. Okay. And next, as I've told you, the mathematical relationship between the public key, any message encrypted with one key of the pair can be successfully only when that key is counterpart. So next, symmetric cryptography. So now let us go into more. Here we will deal with the this part, means algorithm part. Okay, so let's have a background of that first. So as I've told you that first we will go to a symmetric key cryptography. So it is a secret key cryptography where key is kept secret between the sender and the receiver, and that key is shared between the sender and the receiver by some means. Okay, so the problem with this methodology is the key distribution principle, and there are some algorithms here for the symmetric key cryptography, because I have told you that in the encryption principle you will have a key, and an algorithm means your plain text will go transformation into the cipher text using a key and the algorithm, and the algorithm is known to everybody, only the key is kept secret. Okay, so we will study some algorithms here, how those algorithms helps us in maintaining secrecy and how strong those algorithms are there. So although there are following symmetric key algorithms, this is DES, triple DES, AES, that is known as Ejendale, IDEA, RC5, RC6, and Blowfish. But in today's session, I will cover only DES algorithm, and because I will cover DES, so triple DES will also be covered because this is a modified form of the DES. And what is DES? DES means data encryption standard, and triple DES means here 3 keys are used for data encryption standard. AES means advanced encryption standard. Okay, so DES is data encryption standard, and AES is your advanced encryption standard. Okay, so as I have told you, in the encryption and decryption in the symmetric key principle, there is a plain text, then it is encrypted using the key and the algorithm, and your cipher text is produced. And then again at the decryption side, the cipher text is taken, and again the reverse of the algorithm and the same key is used to produce the plain text. Okay, now let us come to DES data encryption standard. So this slide shows you some of the history of how this was evolved. So in 1973, US NBS, National Bureau of Standards, now called NIST, request for proposals. In 1974, second request for proposal was submitted. US NSA had just submitted cipher. So some IBM submitted its cipher, and later on it was in 1996 to 1998, DES was widely used worldwide. In 1998, DES was subjected to brute force attack and it was broken. So now DES is not considered to be a secure algorithm. Data encryption standard is now considered to be a secure algorithm. Okay. So now let us see how encryption happens using this DES or data encryption standard algorithm. Okay. So you see that there is a data, and that data may be of any size. Okay, so that data is broken into blocks here. Okay, a block of 64 bits is taken in this DES, and that block of 64 bits means your whole data will be divided into blocks of 64 bits, and your encrypt DES will be applied to each block of 64 bits, and then the ciphertext will be produced. Okay, so here 56 bits are used for the key. So that means if you see here, because 56 bits are used for the key, so there are 2 to the 56 possible keys is there. So here the key size is of a 56-bit key. And as I have told you that the whole data is broken into blocks of 64 bits. So that's why DES is a example of a block cipher. Okay, but it can also be operated as a stream cipher, where data will be processed in the stream of that is means it will process in a stream of bits. Okay, so this is something called confusion. Ciphertext would depend on the plain text and key in a complicated and involved way. That is confusion. Each bit of ciphertext would depend on all bits of plain text and all bits of the key. This is diffusion. And next is avalanche effect. What it says. It says that small changes to input causes massive variation in output. In DES, flipping one bit of the key or one bit of a 64-bit input block will flip 50% of the output block bit. So avalanche effect is there in this DES. Confusion, diffusion, and this avalanche effect is there. Now let us see the structure of the block diagram of the DES, how DES operates. Okay. So you have as I have told you that this DES is a block cipher. That means it operates on blocks of data. So you have a 64-bit plain text. Okay. And you have a 56-bit key. So that 64-bit plain text will be taken, and then an initial permutation will be performed on that. Okay. So let me show you the initial permutation. This is the initial permutation matrix. What does it shows that in the initial permutation, the 58th bit will come as first, then means it is the placement of the bits, means these bits will be placed like this. Okay, so this is the initial permutation matrix. If you see here the first, at the first place, means at the first row and the first column, 58th bit will come. At the first row and second column, 50th bit will come. At the first row and third column, 48th bit will come. At the first row and fourth column, 34th bit will come. And similarly, the placement of bits are shown here. And there is a row column position for a particular bit. So that means when you will take a 64-bit plain text, that will be converted through an initial permutation to a different form. And that initial permutation will just mangle the bits. Okay. And now what will be the mangled output? That will go to round 1. We will see what will happen in each round. We will discuss in detail about this round in the later part. So initial permutation will perform, that will go to round 1. And similarly, as the round 1 is there, there will be 16 rounds. Okay, means 16 rounds will be performed. And after that, whatever the output of the round 16 is there, that the output will be swapped, means left and right halves will be swapped. What will be the output of the round 16? That will be swapped, and then an inverse permutation will perform, and then we will get the 64-bit ciphertext. So if you want to see the inverse permutation, what is the inverse permutation? This is your this is your final permutation. Final inverse permutation. This is the inverse permutation matrix. So means whatever the bit that is coming as input to this initial permutation matrix, means first row and first column will be occupied by 48th bit, and likewise the arrangement of the bits will be done like this. So this is your initial permutation, and this is the matrix for the final permutation or the inverse permutation. So this is the initial permutation matrix, and this just shows how bits will be placed in this initial permutation, and in the final permutation it shows whatever input is coming, whatever the bits are coming as input to final permutations, they will be placed in the or position as shown in this initial inverse permutation matrix. Okay, so let us just have a broader look at this block diagram. So we are having a 64-bit plain text. We are performing an initial permutation on that, and then we are performing 16 rounds on the initial permutation output. Means first round 1 will be performed, then round 2 will be performed, and in the similar way in the last round 16 will be performed. We will go into detail what happens in this round in the later part of this lecture, and the output of the round 16 will be swapped, means left and right halves of this output of this round 16 will be swapped, and then it will go to an inverse permutation matrix as I have shown you, where the bits will be mangled, and then we will get a 64-bit cipher text. So the key which is used here is 56-bit, and the plain text block that is used is 64-bit. So each block which is used here is of 64-bit. Okay, so this is the broad block diagram of the DES. Okay, so here again it is shown here. So it is shown in more detail, a little bit more detail here. So this is 64-bit plain text. Initial permutation is performed. From the initial permutation, again the 64-bit output will be generated. Then it will go to round 1, where again a 64-bit output will be generated. It will go to round 2. In the round 1, some key will be input to it. So how will that key will be there? So actually the key size is 64-bit, but through the permutated choice 1, I will show you what is the permutated choice 1. It will be converted to a 56-bit key. Now let us see what is this permutated choice 1 and how this 64-bit key is being converted to 56-bit key. Okay, so this is your permuted choice 1. Okay, so here, so note that only 56 bits of the 64 bits inputs are selected. So if you see here, how much row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 into 4, 28, and here again in the right half, 7 into 4, 28. So that means in the permuted choice 1, the bits are placed in this form, and only 56 bits are maintained out of 64 bits. So if you see here, your 64-bit is going, but through the permutated choice, only 56 bits are maintained, as I have shown you in this permuted choice 1 matrix. So if you see here, the only 56 bits are being maintained through this permuted choice, and the positioning of bits are shown in this matrix. So bits will be positioned like this, and only 56 bits will be preserved out of the 64 bits, and the placements of bits will be like this permuted choice 1. So that means here your 64-bit is going to permuted choice 1, and then 56-bit output is coming, and this 56-bit output is going to left circular shift. That means a left circular shift will be performed on this 56 bits, and since this left circular shift will not reduce the number of bits, so the output of the left circular bits, that is 56 bits, will go downwards as well as parallel also. So it will go to the permuted choice 2. And if you see the output of the permuted choice 2, that is a 48-bit. So now let us see how this permuted, what is this permuted choice 2, and how it converts this 56-bit key to a 48-bit key. So now let us see the permuted choice 2. So this is permuted choice. See, if you see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 columns are there, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 rows are there. That means now only out of 56, 48 bits are preserved, and the placements of bits are according to this permuted choice 2. Okay, so your 56 bits will be placed in 48 bit, means 6 bits will be omitted and only 48 bits will be preserved, and this will be means this will be rearranged according to this permuted choice PC2 matrix. Okay, so that means your 56-bit output input is going to the permuted choice 2, and we are getting an input of 48 bits. So the effective key size that is being used in round 1 is your 48-bit key and 64-bit this plain text that is being mangled from the initial permutation. Okay, and from this left circular bit, the 56-bit key is going through again a left circular shift process, and similarly this 56-bit is given to the permuted choice 2, and we are getting a second round key also of 48-bit. So in the round 1, how this 64-bit is being converted to a effective key size of 48-bit, you have seen the whole process. Okay, so it will go through the permuted choice 1, from which only 56 bits will be preserved, and they will be arranged according to the matrix formation or the matrix position of the permuted choice 1, and then it will go through a left circular shift, and then that left circular shift will give the output of 56-bit, and that will go to the permuted choice 2. And as I have shown you the permuted choice 2 matrix, where this 56-bit will be preserved, where only 48 bits of this 56 bits will be preserved, and they will be positioned according to the matrix position of the permuted choice 2, and this will go as input to round 1. So we have seen how this 64-bit key is converted to an effective key size of 48-bit, and how this initial permutation is being performed on the 64-bit plain text. So now what we have? Now we have to go into the detail of round. What is happening in the rounds means how this 64-bit plain text means how this 64-bit output is coming from this round 1, means what is happening in the round. Okay, so now we will go into detail about the round. Okay, so let us go into the rounds. So this is the round of the DES. Okay, so as I have told you previously also, we are getting again I am moving to the previous slide, and then I will again come to this slide just to recall that this initial permutation is giving a output of 64 bits of 64 bits. Okay, so this will go to the round 1. Now let us see, and we are getting a key of 48-bit, effective key size of 48-bit from this transformation on the key. So in the round 1, we are getting 64-bit as input from the initial permutation and 48 bits as an input from this effective key operation. Okay, so now let us see, this is the round. So that means we are getting 64-bit as output. So we will convert, we will divide into two halves, the left half of 32 and right half of 32. Okay, so now what is being done? This right block of 32 is going to a E box. Okay, so what is E box? E box is called expansion box. Okay, and here, as I have told you, the key that is effective key size that is coming is 48-bit. So you are taking input as 32-bit and you are giving it to E box. So naturally you will understand, since effective key size is coming of 48-bit, that means this expansion box should convert this right half size of 32 to 48 bit, and that is the purpose of the expansion box. That means this expansion box will convert this 32 bit to a 48 bit size, and then XOR will be performed on this 48 bit of expansion box with the key of 48 bit. Okay, so now let us see what is expansion box. This is expansion function E. Okay, so if you see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are 6 columns and how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 rows are there. Okay, so that means the 32 bits. That is means this 32 bits which are coming to this expansion box will be enlarged to 48 bits using this expansion matrix which I have shown here. Means these 32 bits will be positioned like this to be converted to 48 bit output. Okay, so this expansion box will now give you a 48 bit output, and this 48 bit of output of this expansion box will be XORed with the key which you are getting of 48 bit, and the output of this will go to 8 non-linear S boxes. Okay, so now let us see what are these S boxes and how these S boxes give you output. Okay, so S boxes are this substitution boxes. Okay, so these are the S boxes. Okay, so here this is the these are S boxes. So this is the row, this is the column, this is the column, and this is the row. So your let me show you how this S boxes. Okay, so this is S box. So if you see here, each how this S box substitutes. So this substitutes according to this. Each S box has its own substitution table. Outer 2 bits select row, and middle 4 bits select column of substitution table. Entry gives new 4 bit value. Okay, so that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so 6 bits are given as inputs to this S box, and out of this 6 bits, outer 2 bits select row of the S box, and middle 4 bits select column of the substitution table. And whatever the value and next this entry gives new 4 bit value. That means if 8 S boxes are there, so there will be a 48 bit will be there, and your output will be a 32 bit. Okay, so again that 48 bit is converted to 32 bit using this substitution boxes. This is the essence of this substitution boxes. The essence of this substitution boxes is that your 48 bit output that is coming. Again, I will go to the previous slide. Okay, so this is the essence of S boxes. Means whatever the 48 bit is coming as input to this S boxes, it is giving 32 bits. So that's why each S box takes 6 bits of input and produces 4 bits of output. So each S box takes 6 bits of input and produces 4 bits of output. So if you see the block diagram here, that means here your right half was taken of the 32 bit, that was converted to a 48 bit using the expansion box. Then next XOR operation was performed with the key of 48 bit size, and now whatever the 48 bit output was there, that was given to 8 S boxes, and each S box will convert 6 bits of input to 4 bit output. And naturally, since 8 S boxes are there, so again the output of 8 S boxes will be 32 bit. Okay, And how that is converted, that is shown in this diagram. So as you see here, this outer 2 bits select row and middle 4 bits select column. Okay, so now let us see. So outer bits are selecting the row and the middle bits are selecting the column. So this corresponds to 0 row and 0 column. Similarly, this will correspond to this first column, and this corresponds to second row. Okay, so in this way row and columns will be selected, and your 6 bits output will be converted by each H box to a 4-bit output. And since 8 H boxes are there, so your 6 into 8, that is 48-bit input, will be converted into 4 into 8, that is 32-bit output. Okay, so this is how the S box are converting. Okay, so now you see the output of S boxes. That means it takes 48-bit as input and gives output as 32-bit. Now this 32-bit output is passed to a permutation block. Okay, so let us see the diagram of this. So this is expansion block, this is S box, this is S box, and this is permutation box. So what is this? This is just a mathematical permutation, and here no bits are enlarged or reduced. Here the 32-bit output is taken and the 32-bit input is taken and the output is 32-bit. Okay, so now let us see the matrix of this permutation box also. This is permutation. This is the permutation matrix. So here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns are there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 rows are there. That means it will not enlarge or decrease the size. It will just take 32-bit input and it will produce a 32-bit output arranged like this, arranged like shown in this permutation matrix. Okay, so now again let us come to our slide. So this is the permutation matrix. So now where we have reached means these 8 S boxes have converted 48-bit input to 32-bit. This 32-bit is going to the permutation box, and this permutation box is converting it to a 32-bit output. Now what will happen to this output? This output will be XORed with this left half of the input that was given to the expansion box. Okay, so this left half will be XORed with the right half, and then you will get the output of this round. Means the output of this round will be, and this right half, whatever the right half was there, it will be taken as left half. So now the output will be this left half of 32-bit and this right half of 32-bit. Means the input to the next round will be again a 64-bit. And again in the second round, the transformation will be same. Means this right 32-bit will go to the expansion box. That expansion box will convert it to a 48-bit, and that 48-bit will be XORed with the 48-bit key, and then that will go into transformation into 8 S boxes, and this 8 S boxes will convert each 6-bit to 4-bit. Each S box will convert 6 bits to the 4 bits, and in this way the 48 bits will be converted to 32 bits, and these 32 bits will go as input to a permutation box, and that permutation box will not enlarge, will increase or decrease the bit. It will just convert that 32, it will just mangle those 32 bits according to the position in the permutation box to 32 bits, and these 32 bits will be XORed with the left half here in the input, and we will get the output a right half of 32 bits, and whatever the right half was taken as input here, that will come as left half here, and this will be the 64-bit output for the next round. And similarly 16 rounds will be performed, and when 16 rounds will be performed, after that, what will happen? The final output will go to this this final permutation. This initial inverse of the permutation, and the output will be, or the ciphertext will be produced. So this is the full process of this DES. Okay. So here the slides are also saying the transformation of this subbits. So I have already explained you the transformation. So this part is clear to you. So now let us come to the security of DES. Okay. So so design criteria, particularly of SS boxes, were not revealed until 1994, but you now know. No known trapdoors, no proof of non-existence either, or degree both plain text and key are complemented, so a resulting ciphertext. DES has 4 weak keys and 6 pairs of semi-weak keys, which should not be used. Okay, so it is subjected to brute force attack. It is weak to brute force attack. That's why now DES is not considered to be a secure algorithm, and that's why we go for this triple DES. Triple DES that is considered to be more secure than DES. So now DES is not used, but triple DES is used. And this triple DES is with 2 keys. That means here 2 keys will be used in triple DES with 2 keys. If you see here, this is encryption. So this is your this first encryption is performed, then this decryption is performed, and then this again it is encrypted using K1. But in this 3 DS, it is encrypted. Again, this transformation is performed on with key K2, and again transformation is performed with key K3. Okay, so this is in triple DS with 2 keys. That means there will be 2 different keys, and in triple DS with 3 keys will be used. Okay, so there are stages here. So 3 key considered unnecessary. Cost of 2 key attack is 2 to the power of 112, as no 56 keys there. So 2 to the power 112. Second stage is decryption, because if K2 is equal to K1, we gain backward compatibility with single DS, available in PM, privacy enhanced, PGP, and others. These are the applications which are using this. Triple DS with 3 keys. So here 3 keys will be there, and naturally since 56-bit key is 1 key size, so it is 168-bit key length. So now triple DS is preferred over double DS. Okay, so this was whole about this symmetry key, and we have studied the one of the famous algorithm of the symmetry key, that is your DES, and we have studied the modified part of DES, that is triple DES there. And since DES is subjected to brute force attack, so it has been failed with some weak keys. So now triple DES is where whenever we have to use DS, we use triple DS. Okay. So 255 again. From 245 again. So now let us come to public key algorithms. Okay. So public key cryptography. So as I have told you, in public key cryptography, we have 2 keys. Means everybody has a key pair. One is a public key, another is a private key. The public key is distributed worldwide, and that how it is distributed, it is distributed to a public key infrastructure, and everybody knows the public key of others, whereas the private key is kept secret by a user. And encryption, in the encryption principle, the data is encrypted by the public key, and since the corresponding key is only known to the corresponding private key is only known to the owner, so only owner could decrypt it. Okay, so this is the encryption principle that is followed in public key. And now let us come to the algorithm part. So here there is a famous public key algorithm, and that is strong enough also. That is your RSA algorithm. Okay. So we will study this RSA algorithm here, and it is the principle of this RSA algorithm is that the principle is that it is very difficult to factorize the multiplication of two large prime numbers. So this is the fundamental principle of this RSA algorithm. And why it is named as RSA? It is named on the three researchers, Ron Rivers, Adi Samir, and Len Edelman. Okay, so these are the three researchers who have derived this algorithm, public key algorithms, and this is known as RSA, or the public key encryption algorithm. Okay. Okay, so to understand this algorithm, some concepts of modular arithmetic, prime number, the Euclidean algorithm, and the method of repeated squares should be clear, but I will not go into detail into the modular arithmetic or prime number part. I assume that you already know that, and I will only concentrate on the RSA algorithm. And if you want to know in detail about the modular arithmetic, you have ample material or internet, and most of you who are coming from the CBSE background or like that must have been familiar with all this arithmetic that is involved in RSA. But RSA is very easy to understand. I will just show you. Okay, so we will not go into detail into the mathematical part, but we will study RSA here. Okay, so let us see the operation of the RSA. Okay, so here we will take two large prime numbers P and Q. Okay, so in the RSA, two large prime numbers P and Q are taken, and a product of them, that N is calculated, where N is the product of two large prime numbers P and Q. Okay, so the first step is that we have to take two large prime numbers P and Q, and let N be the product of two large prime numbers. Now we will select a special number E, which is greater than 1 and less than P minus 1, Q minus 1. Okay, so we will select a special number special number E that will be greater than 1 and less than P minus Q minus 1. The precise mathematical property that E must have is that there must be no numbers that divide neatly into E and into P minus 1, Q minus 1, except for 1. That means E and P minus 1 product, that is P minus 1 into Q minus 1, that will be relatively prime to each other. Means there should not be any number which divides neatly to E and to this except 1. And then we will publish the pair of numbers N comma E. So this is your private, this is your public key. Okay. So what we will do to calculate the public key, we will select two large prime numbers, then N will be the product of those prime numbers. Then we will select a special number E, and the special number E will be such that it is greater than 1 and less than the product of P minus 1, Q minus 1. And then the E will have a property that E and P minus 1, Q minus 1 should be relatively prime to each other. That means there should be no number that neatly divides E as well as P minus 1, Q minus 1 except 1. And when we will have such a number E discovered, we will publish the pair of numbers N comma E, and this will be our public key. Now we have to calculate the private key. So to compute the private key, we have to calculate, let D be our private key, and we have to calculate this private key D from P comma Q and E. Okay, so we have to calculate this private key from P comma Q and E. Okay, so how this private key is calculated? The private key D is computed to be the unique inverse of E modulo P minus 1, Q minus 1. Okay, so in other words, D is the unique number less than P minus 1, Q minus 1. That one multiplied by E gives you 1 modulo P minus 1, Q minus 1. It is written mathematically as ED is equal to 1 mod P minus 1, Q minus 1. Okay. So to calculate this D, the Euclidean algorithm is followed to calculate the D. Okay. Now let us see some examples. So this example will make you clear this algorithm. So let us consider P is equal to 3, Q is equal to 7. Now you will say that why you are having such small prime numbers, because this is just for demonstration. That's why I am not taking too large prime numbers, because that will be very computationally difficult to show you in this example. So I am taking P is equal to 3 and Q is equal to 7. Okay. So now let us see what choices of E are acceptable. Now let us select E. Okay. So let us see how we select E. So in this case, P minus 1, Q minus 1 is equal to 2 into 6 is equal to 12. Okay. That means our E should be greater than 1 and it should be less than 12. Okay. Okay. So now let us select E is equal to 2. So this is not a good choice, since 2 divides both E and 12. And what the properties should have? That this 12 and E should not be divisible except 1. Okay. So E is equal to 2. If you are selecting E, then 2 divides 2 as well as 12. If you select E as a 3, then it is there, since 3 divides both E and 12. Now the remaining choices are 5, 7 and 11. So in each case, there is no number that divides into them and 12 other than 1. All these choices are of E are possible. So this is how we select E. So here you can select E as 5, you can select E as 7, you can select E as 11, because if you see E is equal to 5, it falls between 1 and 12. Again, if you divide 5, if you see any number which divides 5 and 3, there is no number except 1 which divides 5 and 12. Similarly, if you take E as 7, there is no other number than 1 which divides 7 and 12. Similarly, if you take E as 11, there is no other number which divides 11 and 12 other than 1. So we can choose E is equal to 5, E is equal to 7, and E is equal to 11. Okay. So now this was the method that was shown to you to select E. Now let us take example, RSA example. Here we will show the whole demonstration of the algorithm of the RSA. So now step 1, let us take P is equal to 47 and Q is equal to 59. Again, this is taken as a small, it is not a very large prime number, because it is just for demonstration purposes. So demonstration we want to take as simple as simple. So that's why it is shown as P is equal to 47 and Q is equal to 59. And the product N is equal to 47 into 59, that is 2773. Okay. Now select E is equal to 17. Naturally, that means there should not be any number between 17 and 2773 other than 1 which should neatly divide 17 and 2773. So if you see there, it will be 17. Okay. So now publish N comma E. This will be your public key. So 2773 comma 17 you have published. Now let us calculate the private key. So how you will calculate private key? So first you will compute P minus 1 into Q minus 1, that is 2668. And using Euclidean algorithm, you will calculate the D, and D will come as 157. Okay. That is 17 into 57 is equal to 269, and this is equivalent to 1 mod 266. That's why 157 is taken as D, because if you see 2669 and if you divide it by 2668, you are getting a remainder of 1. So that means D is a correct choice. So D is equal to 157. If you read the equilibrium algorithm, you will able to calculate D. So, okay, so now we have public key that is 2773, and our private key is 157. Okay, so private key is coming as 157 and public key is coming as 2773, 70. So now let us see how we will perform encryption and decryption. So encryption is to obtain the ciphertext from plain text in a very simple way. C is equal to m to the power e mod n, and the decryption m is equal to c to the power d mod n. That means C is the ciphertext, and what is m? M is your this here. Suppose the plain text block represented as a number. This is m is equal to 1. This is the message. M is your message. So m to the power e mod n, and then you are again getting the message by putting ciphertext to the power d and mod n. So on the message you will put this e mod n. This will be the ciphertext, and this will be the decryption process. You will get the original message. So, okay, so our public key is 2773, 17, and private key is 157. So here your m is equal to 31. So now let us perform the encryption. So encryption using public key is performed m to the power e mod n. So our n is this. If you see here, we have published this private key. So n comma e. So n was 2773 and e is 17. So we are putting 31 to the power 17 mod 2773. So this is coming as 587. That means the message 31 is converted into ciphertext 587. Now let us perform the decryption process. The decryption process is C to the power means ciphertext to the power D mod n. So what is our ciphertext? Ciphertext is our 587 to the power D. What is our private key? The private key is 157. So 587 to the power D mod 2773, and we are getting this as 31. So we have got the message. So this is the encryption and the decryption process using the RSA. So it is a very simple algorithm. Only you have to have a knowledge of the Euclidean algorithm to calculate D. Okay. So I am not going into detail of the Euclidean algorithm. You study by yourself. I will circulate. It is available in most of the literature. And if you want to have the matter about the Euclidean algorithm, you can write mail to me, and I will give you it on your mail. An example also how to calculate this D using this Euclidean algorithm. Okay, so there are two one-way. So now let us come to the security summary of this RSA. So encryption function. So this encryption function is a trapdoor one-way function whose trapdoor is the private key. The difficulty of reversing this function without the trapdoor knowledge is believed to be difficult as factoring. Okay, the difficulty of determining an RSA private key from an RSA public key is known to be equivalent to factoring n. An attacker thus cannot use knowledge of an RSA public key to determine an RSA private key unless they can factor n. And because multiplication of two primes is believed to be a one-way function, determining an RSA private key from an RSA public key is believed to be very difficult. Okay, so that's why RSA is considered to be the most secure public key algorithm, and that is why it is used widely for the public key cryptography part. Okay, so for the public key cryptography, the most widely used algorithm is RSA, and you have seen the mechanism how the RSA functions. So now you are familiar with the private key cryptography, symmetric key, private key or symmetric key cryptography. And again, you are familiar with public key cryptography or asymmetric key cryptography. You have studied the symmetric key algorithm DS, and you see that now DS is not considered to be very secure. That's why we are going for triple DS. And now we have an advanced symmetric algorithm, that is AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, that is most widely preferred. Okay, so in the symmetric key algorithm, although you have studied DS and triple DS, you have not studied AES, but because that was not part of this. So you have studied the DS and triple DS, and now we have a symmetric key algorithm that is more advanced, that is AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. But in the public key cryptography, you have seen the RSA, and that is the widely or publicly used public key algorithm. Okay, so now let us come to SSL, some applications of this cryptography. So now first, so this cryptography is applied in most of the protocols or the security protocols which we use these days. So one of them is SSL. Okay, so now let us come to SSL. Okay, so SSL is Secure Socket Layer. This is a security protocol, and this protocol is used to keep the data that is in transit secure. Okay, so when the data is in transit, this SSL protocol makes it secure. Okay, so whenever you communicate with your web server or other things, this is the SSL protocol that keeps your communication that is in transit to be secure. Okay, so now let us see how the SSL functions. Okay, so as I have told you, this is an application of a cryptography. So it is based on the cryptography principles which we have studied just in the previous slides. Okay, so now suppose you are having a browser and this is your web server, and your browser is communicating to this web server using HTTPS that is built over SSL. Okay, so in this, the first communication which you will do with the web server, that will be through the asymmetric cryptography, and that will be the known as SSL handshake. So in this SSL, there are two parts. There is a SSL handshake, and then there is a data transfer. So SSL handshake is based on asymmetric cryptography, whereas the actual data transfer is based on symmetric key cryptography. So actually the SSL handshake will happen through asymmetric key cryptography principles, and whereas the actual data transfer will happen through this symmetric key cryptography. Okay, so that means both types of cryptography are used, that is asymmetric cryptography and symmetric cryptography. Now here I will tell you one thing. We have studied this symmetric cryptography and this asymmetric cryptography. So this symmetric key cryptography is considered to be fast, okay, because here there is only one key and that key is transferred between them, and it is not built on a very strong mathematics, so it is a fast. Okay, so for the bulk encryption, that means we can prefer symmetric key cryptography, whereas asymmetric key cryptography is slow. Although for public communication, asymmetric key cryptography is preferred because one-to-many communication can be done using asymmetric key cryptography. That's why asymmetric key cryptography is preferred for public communication, whereas symmetric key cryptography is fast. So we have to leverage the benefits of both the cryptography, and that's why we used hybrid key cryptography, that is mixed of asymmetric key cryptography and symmetric key cryptography. So since suppose in this SSL we are using hybrid key cryptography, because we are using asymmetric key cryptography for SSL handshake process and symmetric key cryptography for data transfer process. Okay, so it will be means we can communicate with many persons, and also our communication will be fast. So how we can communicate with many persons? Because initially the authentication and the key sharing will be done using a session key will be shared in this asymmetric key cryptography part. And now since this session key will be shared between this browser and the web server. That means now they can communicate using symmetric key cryptography. That means they can use symmetric key cryptography for bulk data encryption. So means the data transfer will be fast. Okay. So initially the asymmetric cryptography will be used for SSL handshake, in which a session key will be shared between the client and the server, and that session key, which is shared between the client and the server, will be used in the data transfer part to make the communication, to make the encryption faster and to make the data transfer faster in the secure mode. Okay. So now let us concentrate on SSL. So SSL is having two parts, that is SSL handshake part and data transfer part. The SSL handshake process is depending on the asymmetric cryptography, and the data transfer part is depending on the symmetric cryptography. Okay. So now let us come to the SSL handshake process. What are the steps involved in SSL handshake process? So the steps involved are in SSL handshake process is that the browser will send a client hello message to the server, then server will send a hello message to the client, and then when the hello message will be received by the browser, it will send an encrypted session key to the server, and then server will send acknowledgement, and now both will start the actual data transfer part using this session key. But now let us see what are the details in this client hello message, what is the detail of this server hello message, and how they send this encrypted session key, and how this acknowledgement is sent. Okay. So now the client sends a client hello message. So what this client hello message contains? This includes the client SSL version number, cipher settings, session specific data, and other information that server needs to communicate with the client using SSL. So these information, the client SSL version number, cipher settings, session specific data, and other information that server needs to communicate with the client using SSL is sent through this client hello message. Now the server responds with the server hello message. What this message contains? This includes the server's SSL version number, cipher settings, session specific data, and SSL certificate with a public key, and other information that the client needs to communicate with the server over SSL. So in this part, in the server hello message, if you see here, the server is sending its public key to the client. Okay. So if you see here, there is some authentication part also, since server is sending its hello message is public key. So that public key will be verified with the certification authority. As I have told you here, I will tell little about you the public key infrastructure, that when we distribute our public key, that is through a public key infrastructure. And from where we get our public key certified, that is through a certification authority. That means a certificate authority certifies our public key. So it is a third trusted party with both the client and the server trust, and it certifies the public key of a person. Okay, and it fixes, as you have got a passport issued to you that binds your identity with that password. Similarly, your public key entity is binded to you through this certificate authority. Means certificate authority collects all your information, all your details through the means you have to apply for the public key or the private key to the certificate authority, and then this certificate authority will issue you a public key and a private key. That private key you will keep secret with yourself, and the public key will be available on the certificate authority digital infrastructure, and that is called public key infrastructure. So that means certificate authority certifies your public key and it binds your public key to your identity. Means if somebody wants to know that this public key belongs to whom, that could be ascertained from the certificate authority. So this certificate authority is a third party which certifies your digital certificate. So that means in the initial part, the client is sending hello message and the client is sending the SSL version number, cipher settings, session specific data, and other information that server needs to communicate the client. And in the next part, the server is sending hello message in which the server is sending a SSL version number, cipher settings, session specific data, and it is also sending its public key that is known as a SSL certificate with a public key and other information that the client needs to communicate. So now the client is having this server's public key, so it will verify with the certificate authority that this public key belongs to the server. Now when it is certified by the CA authority that this public key belongs to this server, what will client will do? Client will generate a private key and it will encrypt using the server public key. And since it is encrypted using the server public key, so the server, it will only be decrypted by the server. That means whatever the session key you have created at the client side, that session key will be transmitted in a secure way to the server. And now once the server receives this session key, it will send an acknowledgement to the client. So what is the acknowledgement? Now let us see in the third phase, the client verifies the server SSL certificate from the certificate authority. This I have already told you, and authenticates the server. The authentication phase, then the client refuses the SSL connection and throws an exception. If the exception succeeds, then proceed to step 4. So now in the fourth step, the client creates a session key, encrypts it with the server public key and sends it to the server. If the server has requested client authentication, mostly in server-to-server communication, then the client sends its own certificate to the server. If the server requires client certificate also, he can ask for the client server and by asking for authentication, and then client has also to send its certificate to the server. Now the server decrypts the session key. Now the session keys has been received by the server. So the server decrypts the session key with its private key and sends the acknowledgement to the client encrypted with the session key. So that acknowledgement is sent using the encrypted session key. And now since session key is only available to the client and the server, so now they can communicate using symmetric key cryptography. So that acknowledgement number will be decrypted by the client, and the client now has the acknowledgement received from the server, and now both have the session key or the symmetric key. So now the actual data transfer will take place using this symmetric key encryption. So encrypt data with session key, and the server also decrypt data with session key. So here we are leveraging the benefit of both, that is asymmetric key cryptography that will be used for building one-to-many or many-to-many communications. And now this in the session part, in the actual data transfer part, we will be using the symmetric key cryptography for bulk data transfer because it is a fast cryptography technique. So this is all about the SSL. So actual data transfer, the client and the server now use the same session key to encrypt and decrypt actual data and transfer it. This is done using the same session key at both ends, and so it is a symmetric key cryptography. The actual SSL data transfer uses symmetric key cryptography because it is easy and take less. It is written as cup, but it should be CPU consumption compared with the asymmetric key cryptography. It is fast. Okay. So with this, we are finished with SSL. Let us see, is there a break here? Okay. So there's 10 minutes more time. So I will cover SSL also, and then we will have a question and answer session, and then back session, and then we will proceed to the next part. Okay. So now let us come to the SSL. SSH, understanding SSH. Okay, so what is SSH? In most of you must have used Telnet. Okay, so why do you use Telnet? You use Telnet to log into a remote server. Okay, But now most of you must have realized that this telnet is not a secure communication protocol. Why it is not a secure communication protocol? Because it transfers the data in textual format, in clear text format. Means anybody can read that data. The data transferred is in a telnet is in a clear text format. It is not transferred in a encrypted way. Okay, so anybody can read it. Now you have on the third day of this training session. So you must have seen there are various tools, sniffing tools available. Through those sniffing tools, anybody can tap into your network and can tap whatever the data that is being transferred in the clear text format. So this telnet is not a secure password because it's a secure protocol, because whatever the data they transmit, it transmits in a clear text format. So this clear text format can be tabbed, and whatever the data that is under transmission or in transit could be read by anyone. And similarly, since you log into a remote server, so you also give your username and password to the remote server. And if you are using this telnet, then whatever the username or password you are giving, that also goes in the clear text format. So that means your username and password could also be compromised, because if somebody is sniffing that, he can gain the information about your username and password, and anybody can have your telnet credentials and can log into the remote server using your username and password through telnet. So to make it secure, the SSH came into existence, and SSH is that which transmits your data. That means that it allows you to log into a remote server in a cryptographically secured way, that is in an encrypted way. Okay, so this secure cell is a secure socket cell is a or secure cell or secure socket cell is a secure means to log into a remote server. So this SSH client and SSH server, they communicate using the port 22. So SSH uses the port 22, whereas telnet uses the port 23. So SSH uses the port 22. Okay, so SSH is also based on symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption and hashing in order to secure transmission of information. What is hashing? You know that hashing, whenever you give a message, although I will cover in the next lecture about it in detail about the hashing. So in hashing, you give a message and a message digest is calculated of that message, and that message is unique. That means if you even change a comma or a full stop in your message, that hash generated will be different. Okay, so this SSH protocol is based on symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, and hashing. Okay, so the SSH connection between the client and the server happens in 3 stages. The 3 stages are verification of the server by the client, generation of a session key to encrypt all the communication. I have already told you, whenever you are using the encryption, when you are using the actual data transfer, this symmetric encryption will be used because it is fast, and that's why it is used for bulk data transfer. Bulk encryption, your symmetric encryption is used. So this hybrid key cryptography principle will always be there, where a session key will be transferred using the asymmetric key cryptography, and next the bulk encryption will be performed by symmetric key cryptography. So similar happens in this SSH. So the verification of the server by the client, generation of a session key to encrypt all the communication, and authentication of the client. These are the 3 stages in the SSH working. So what happens in the verification of the server? So in the verification of the server, the client initiates a SSH connection with the server. Server listens to default port 22, as I have told you, for SSH connections. At this point, the server identity is verified. There are 2 cases. Okay, so the client is initiating a connection to the server on the port 22. And now here in this part, the verification of the server will be done. That means server identity will be verified. Okay, so there are 2 cases. If the client is accessing the server for the first time, client is asked to authenticate server manually by verifying public key of server. Public key of server can be found using SSH key scan command or can be found at different places. That means you can found it at through public key infrastructure also. So you have to find it manually, the public key of the server, and now you have to, if you are accessing it for the first time, or you can use the SSH key scan command to find the public key of the server. Once the key is verified, the server is added to the known host file in .ssh directory on client machine. The known host file contains the information about all the verified servers by the client. So if it is accessing for the first time, it has to find the public key of the server. If the server's public key is found, now the server will be added to known host file of the SSH directory in the client. And if the client is not accessing the server for the first time, the server's identity is matched with previously recorded information in the known host file for the verification. Naturally, if you are accessing for it the second time, the information will be available in your known host file, and from that you can verify that the server is valid. So this is the content of the known host file shown in the snapshot here. Now, next will be the generation of the session key. Okay. So after the server is verified, both the parties negotiate a session key using a version of something called the Diffie-Hellman algorithm. Although we have not covered this Diffie algorithm in this part of lecture, there is a Diffie-Hellman algorithm that is used for session key sharing. So here, Diffie-Hellman algorithm will be used to transfer this session key. Okay, so this algorithm is designed in such a way that both the parties contribute equally in generation of session key. The generated session key is shared symmetric key, that is the same key is used for encryption and decryption. So now it is a shared session key will be shared between the client and the server using Diffie-Hellman algorithm. So now you have generated the session key, and now authentication of the client will be done. So the final stage involves authentication of the client. Authentication is done using SSH key pair. As the name suggests, SSH key pair is nothing but a pair of two keys to serve two different purposes. One is public key that is used to encrypt data and can be freely shared. The other one is private key that is used to decrypt data and is never shared with anyone. So this principle will be used. So now let us see how client authenticates. So after symmetric encryption has been established, the authentication of the client happens as follows. So now let us see how the authentication of the client is done. The client begins by sending an ID for the key pair it would like to authenticate with the server. That means it will send an ID of its key pair. The server checks the authorized key files of the account that the client is attempting to log in into for the key ID. If the public key with matching ID is found in the file, the server generates a random number and uses the public key to encrypt the number and send this encrypted message. So now this message is this number which is secretly generated is being sent using the encrypted using the public key of the client. So what the client has to do? The client has to use its private key. Using his private key, it will decrypt the message to obtain the random number that was generated by the server. The client combines the obtained random number with the shared session key and calculates the MD5 hash of this value. Then the client then sends this MD5 hash back to the server as an answer to the encrypted number message. The server uses the same shared session key and the original number it sent to the client to calculate the MD5 value of its own. And if both of it compares its own calculation to the one that client sent back, if these two value matches, it proves that the client was in possession of the private key and the client is authenticated. Asymmetry of the key allows authentication of the client because the client can only decrypt the message if it has the correct associated private key. So this is how the client is verified. So it is verified using asymmetry encryption, where something is being sent using the public key of the client and the client has to decrypt it, and then the client sends that message with a hash value to the server, and the server again calculates that hash value at its side, and if both the hash value matches, That means it is the same client, because that message could only be decrypted by the client having the possession of the private key. And since client has decrypted that message using the private key, that means it is the client, it is the same client who is having the possession of the private key. So that in this way, the client is authentication. So this is how the SSH works. This is the whole process of this. It is shown in a screenshot here. So this is the working of the SSL. So I have told you the working of the SSL, and I have told you the working of SSL. These are the two security protocols that are based on the cryptographic principles. So we can say that these are the applications of the cryptography. Means the cryptography principles are being applied in these two protocols, SSL and SSH. And you have seen that the hybrid cryptography is used in both the cases. That is a mixture of the asymmetric cryptography as well as symmetric cryptography that was used in SSL, and similarly a mixture of symmetric cryptography and asymmetric cryptography was used in the case of SSH also. And why? Because we have to leverage the benefits of the both. Means we will use authentication principles of the asymmetric cryptography, and for transferring the session key, because authentication could be easily done using asymmetric cryptography, and then we will use the fast encryption of the symmetric cryptography for bulk data encryption. So with this, I finish this first part of the lecture, and as I see here,